Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka the hella fast YouTuber that's here to bring you everything you need to know about Kang the Conqueror. Now in episode 6 of Loki, we learned that the entire TVA was masterminded by a version of Nathanial Richards known as He Who Remains. Richards told of a multiversal war that had almost wiped out all life in existence because his variants couldn't decide who had the nicest shoes, and thus he had wiped out entire timelines in order to avoid facing up to himself. He Who Remains gave Loki and Sylvie a choice. Either they could take over his role and carry on the TVA's fascist regime, or they could kill him and allow the multiverse to spring into action. This would usher forth an infinite amount of Kangs, and we were left asking if it's better the devil you know. Now He Who Remains' final words were "I'll see you soon," and with Jonathan Majors propped up to appear in Ant-Man Quantumania, it's pretty clear that Kang will be coming sooner rather than later. But who is Kang and which variants should we be worried about? Well, throughout this video we're going to be breaking down the character as well as his best and worst versions from across the multiverse. If you enjoy the breakdown then please smash the thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe with every single variant of you in order to stop a multi-video war between myself and Ryan Airy. Now before talking about all the variants of Richards, I think we have to discuss the character's origins in the comics. The next part of the video will go over the story of his life and how he came to be established as one of the biggest Marvel villains ever. Nathaniel was born in the 31st century, and he was a descendant of Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic. Obsessed with history and time travel, Richards studied how to manipulate the time stream, and after mastering this he decided to journey through it in order to conquer different timelines throughout the multiverse. Now as we learned in Avengers Endgame, every time you travel back in time, there is the possibility that you can create a branch in reality in which a timeline travels off into its own direction. Each and every time Richards journeyed into the past and affected events there, he in turn created an alternate version of himself, and this is how there's so many variants. Now the first one we have to talk about is Rama Tut. Richards' first major journey through the time stream was to ancient Egypt, and the character traversed the time stream on a sphinx-shaped ship, which allowed him to blend in, because yeah, if there's one thing everyone did back then, it's ride around in a big spaceship. Now hints towards this could actually be seen in The Void in Loki episode 5 when we saw a sphinx with its nose intact, and this is actually very similar looking to the one that Tut had. Side tangent, it is possible that the artifacts and locations we saw in The Void were pulled and culled Kang timelines, and this is why we also saw that Avengers tower that had the Qeng logo on it. Anyway, as Tut he wanted to claim En-Sabur-Nur, aka Apocalypse, as his heir. The character debuted in the Fantastic Four 19, and he quickly established himself as a powerful pharaoh during this time. Tut's rule seemed like it could be everlasting, however he was defeated by the Fantastic Four, who had been displaced out of their timeline. Speaking of four and time, how do you know when a clock is hungry? It always goes back 4 seconds, eh? Having that? So yeah, I tell him. Now defeated, Richards ended up travelling to the 20th century, where he came face to face with Dr. Doom, who he believed might also be an ancestor of his. Richards was obviously bitterly disappointed with his defeat at the hands of the Fantastic Four, and the next phase of the character was the Scarlet Centurion, which had armour that was based on Doom's designs. The pair first met in the Fantastic Four Annual 2, and it was one of the most important moments in Richards' life, as he became highly influenced by the supervillain. Years later, several variants of Richards would end up fusing together in order to create Doom the Annihilating Conqueror. This is by far one of the most terrifying and fearsome versions of the villain, and it combined Dr. Doom, Annihilus, and Iron Lad, who we'll talk about later. Now as the Centurion, he attempted to defeat the Avengers, but the character was bested and forced from the timeline. Richards tried to return to the 31st century, however he ended up overshooting by 1,000 years, and he came across an Earth that had been decimated by war. Luckily for Kang, because of the need for soldiers, scientists had sort of died out, and the humans were forced to use weapons and technologies that they knew how to use but didn't really know how to create. Kang ended up conquering this world easily, and it's here that he became Kang the Conqueror, the most infamous version of the character. He developed his technology and armour, which allowed him to gain increased strength and durability. It's at this time he ended up setting up the Damocles base, which, like its namesake, was shaped like a sword. On board were his legion of foot soldiers, and he used these to ravage anything that he wished to take over. During this time, the character also fell for Ravonna Renslayer, who was a princess at one of his many kingdoms. That location was part of an uprising, and after Kang refused to execute her, this led to a revolt, and thus Kang has sort of gone from timeline to timeline attempting to restore his former glory. Now Kang did return to Egypt, and he ruled as Rama Tut for 10 years before placing himself in suspended animation in order to wait it out until the 20th century. This all built towards the celestial Madonna story, in which Kang ended up attempting to marry Mantis because she was apparently destined to bear a child that would be one of the most powerful beings in the universe. Now it's also during this that it was revealed that the character Immortus was actually an older variant of Kang, and most of the versions that live long enough end up becoming him. The design of He Who Remains was actually based heavily on Immortus, and the MCU version is somewhat of an amalgamation between him and, well, He Who Remains. Now Immortus is somewhat of a good guy that has actually helped the Avengers from time to time, and he's basically you when you watch videos of yourself from 10 years ago. He finds himself super cringe and doesn't really want the past version of himself to take over the universe, as he was young, foolish, and didn't thumbs up videos, so everyone hated him. Thus, Immortus and Kang have been trapped in an almost everlasting war, and the most notable happening of this occurred in the comic Avengers Forever, in which the two went head to head. Immortus is basically a more powerful and far more knowledgeable version of Kang, and he learned a wealth of things from the Timekeepers, who you will of course be aware of due to the series. Now they taught him a lot of cosmic information and gave him the power that allowed him to prune and delete his numerous variants. However, Immortus's worst nature got the better of him, and we learned that during this that he was actually also trying to establish himself as the ruler of all time, which no doubt hints towards what may have happened before the events of what we see in the show. Either way, he and his younger self have been locked in an infinite war, and because of this, several versions and variants have come forth. Now the first majorly interesting one I want to touch upon is Kamala Kang. Ms. Marvel is of course coming down the line on Disney+, and there is potential that we might see her one day. During the events of the Infinity Wars comic book storyline, Gamora ended up bending and folding reality, and this meshed several characters together. Kamala possessed all the technical and scientific knowledge that Kang had, and on top of this she brought with her her ability to shapeshift. By far one of the most powerful versions of Kang. I would absolutely love to see her pop up in the MCU at some point. Now another version of Kang is Iron Lad, who ended up forming the Young Avengers. With the likes of Wiccan and Speed as well as Eli Bradley all popping up in the shows, it's possible that Iron Lad 2 could be coming down the line in order to help form the team. He wears a suit of armor similar to Tony Stark's, and it's able to change shape with a thought. He's definitely one of the strongest in the Young Avengers team, and it makes a lot of sense that he could pop up at some time too. Other notable versions are Victor Timely, a version of Richards who journeyed back in time to 1901, and here he set up the town Timely in Wisconsin. Get it? Because he's called Timely and he messes with time. Lee. Now the name Victor is also a nod to Victor Von Doom, and he's got a lot of cool Easter eggs attached to him. After first showing up in Avengers Annual 21, Timely has appeared from time to time, and he was actually the character whose experiments led to the original android Human Torch, who you may know from Timely Comics. Timely Comics eventually changed its name to Atlas Comics, and Atlas Comics ended up becoming the Marvel Comics that we know today. So Victor has a number of meta things surrounding him, and I think it would be a great wink to the audience to have him show up. Now the last variant I think has a high possibility of being in the MCU is Mr. Griffin. Griffin actually ended up purchasing Avengers Tower from Tony Stark, and out of it he ran his company Qeng Industries. Using his technology skills he managed to possess the Vision, something that we already saw Hayward do in WandaVision. Potentially it could turn out that he was the one who helped to fund Sword with their experiments, and with the Qeng building already showing up, I think it would be great to see him appear. Anyway, that should cover everything you need to know about Kang and his variants. Now obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on the character and what you want to see in the MCU, so make sure you leave them in the comments below. We are running a competition right now and giving away 3 MCU box sets on the 30th of July, and all you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on Kang. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers if that's you. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of everything we know about Season 2, which will be linked on screen right now. We've gone over all the little bits of info we know, and also talked about some of the things we learned in the behind the scenes special, so definitely go watch it if you want to know more about the series. With that out of the way, thank you for sitting through this. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.